Hello and welcome. I'm Good News, your trusted human rights advocate and an online law professor. Today, I will explore a very crucial topic, which is the rights and responsibilities of both the landlord and the tenant, and as well as the valid mode of terminating a tenancy. Remember, in my previous video, I discussed extensively the landlord and tenant relationship. Now let's dive into their rights and responsibilities. I will take them seriatim. Firstly, the rights of the landlord. It is the right of the landlord to receive rent from his tenant when due. It is the duty of the tenant to consistently pay his rent to his landlord. It is also his right to access the property when necessary. I use the word when necessary so that the landlord don't cause undue unnecessary disturbance to the tenant in the name of the property belongs to me. It is only when necessary that he should have access to the property. Probably when he wants to introduce the tenant to his co-tenant, or he wants to inspect the property to carry out repairs or maintenance. Ordinarily, he shouldn't disturb the tenant. Also, he has the right to evict a tenant who refuses to pay his rent or who is in breach of the agreement. He also has the right to demand for repair and maintenance of the property from the tenant when the tenant fails to do so. So these are some of his rights. Let's consider his responsibilities. It is the responsibility of the landlord to ensure that the property is in a conducive, that is, habitable state. It should be conducive for the tenant to live in. It is also his responsibility to pay for any taxes attached to that property or rates. It is also his responsibility to obey any law applicable or governing that property. It is also his responsibility to carry out fundamental repair and maintenance of the property. So these are some of his responsibilities. Let's consider the rights of the tenant. It is the right of the tenant to demand for receipt of rent payment. It is also his right to demand for fundamental repair and maintenance of the property. It is also his right to enjoy the property. That is, they call it quiet possession. That is to say that the landlord should not cause any unnecessary disturbance or nuisance to the tenant. These are some of his rights. Let's consider his responsibility. It is his responsibility to ensure he confines himself within the terms and conditions of the tenancy. It is also his responsibility to carry out repairs and maintenance to that property. It is also his responsibility to pay his rent consistently. It is also his responsibility to respect the tenant and his co-tenant. So these are their rights and responsibilities. It is imperative to state that both the tenant and the landlord have the right to terminate the tenancy. This brings us to the second arm of this topic, which is termination of tenancy. The termination of tenancy simply means bringing a tenancy to an end. This can be done by either party. But in doing so, it is essential for them to understand the termination process and notice requirements. In other words, for a party to terminate the tenancy, a reasonable notice has to be given to the other party. The duration of this reasonable notice is determined by the tenancy agreement. For instance, if the tenancy agreement expressly states that a tenant or a landlord should give the other party a month's notice upon termination of the tenancy, that tenant or landlord should comply with that requirement. But the issue is, or the controversy is, where there is no tenancy agreement stipulating that, or where there is a tenancy agreement but is silent as to notice period. What happens?